That's it.
There we go.
Thanks. Great. Okay, welcome to those in attendance at this remote meeting of Aberdeen City Licensing Board on Tuesday, the 13th of April 2021. Can all members of the board keep their cameras switched on but their microphones muted? The microphone should only be switched on when you're invited to speak. I will now ask the clerk to undertake a roll call for the members participating today and for all members to confirm their attendance once their name has been announced by the clerk, so that it's clear for the recording of the meeting and can also be recorded by the clerk for the minute. I'll just remind everybody that the licensing board contains quasi-judicial business. Members are reminded they should not leave the room or the meeting during consideration of any applications. Anybody having technical difficulties, if you can somehow let us know, either calling the clerk in the chat or signalling to me. I know it's difficult if you've been kicked out, but we'll try and keep an eye on everyone because I know that the technology has been playing up a little bit. Mr. Munro, can I get you to do the roll call? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, convener.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Dunbar.
Good morning.
Thank you. Councillor Grant, I think, was going to be late.
That's right.
Councillor Gregg.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor McClellan.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Seller.
Here.
Thank you. And Councillor Townsend.
Here.
Thank you.
Excellent, you're all here. And can I just check, Councillor McClellan, if you managed to get your papers?
Yeah, that's sorted now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, okay. Well, we'll crack on with the agenda. Item 1, we have the minutes of the meeting of the 2nd of February. They're laid out on pages 3 to 18. Can we agree they're an accurate minute? Great. Okay, thank you. We're moving on to item 2, which is the Licensing Board's Equality Outcomes and Mainstreaming Report. They're on pages 19 to 34. Karen, do you want to say anything on this report?
Hi there. It's pretty all self-explanatory. It's really just be covering what the equalities outcomes were for the last 5 years and how we've met them, and introducing the new ones for the next 4 or 5 years.
Okay, thanks very much, Karen. Any questions on this report for Karen? No? Councillor Cameron.
Now, the only difficulty I've got is finding where the question is, but it's a relatively straightforward one. We're speaking about hybrid meetings, and I know just now we have hybrid meetings because of COVID. But would this policy mean that hybrid meetings would continue in the light of people with disabilities who couldn't attend meetings? So, you know, it would. I know that in other places we've looked at hybrid meetings as a temporary basis, and I just wondered, my apologies for not actually finding it. I mean, if somebody wants to attempt to answer it, I'll try and find the actual reference, but it was really along the lines of, if we can have hybrid meetings just now, that's great. That really does help us in some instances. But is the policy then to continue with hybrid meetings when we actually need that for equality? If that makes sense. Car, if you want to have a go at that, Car.
I think that's what we're planning to look at. I don't see why it can't happen. We now have the technology in place, and we have big screens in the meeting rooms, so there's no reason why we can't go ahead and maybe carry on with those for people that can't physically get into the board meetings.
Yeah, I think it's something we are looking at. My understanding is the committee rooms aren't actually set up for it just now. It's only the council chamber that's almost like ready for doing that just now. But certainly, yes, and as Karen said, it's something we are looking to do, so that if somebody couldn't physically attend, they could still virtually attend the meeting. So as you said, that this has been a sort of introduction to that, and given that it is possible, yes, it's something that we're going to look to ensure that we offer attendance of some sort to meetings to as many people as we can.
No, that's great. That answers my question, and apologies for not actually finding the reference.
Don't worry, Councillor Cameron, I know it's difficult sometimes. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, convener. I wanted to ask about the issue of publicity and public engagement. That's mentioned in relation to the board and to the information regarding the board's business. And I'm kind of assuming that that includes information about applications itself and the details of applications. I mean, I get feedback that our publicity of applications is not sufficient. I get that from constituents. So I just wondered if that's something that could be looked at, perhaps. I believe the press means publication in the Evening Express on one day, I think. So just in the interest of equality and transparency, I just wondered if that was something that could be looked at to widen the sharing of information and the various opportunities to do so.
Okay, Mr. Munro, do you want to take that, or?
Yeah, I mean, it is something that's been an issue for a wee while. We are looking at our a computer system for licensing. It's possible we might be changing. We don't know. We're still looking into it. But as part of that is looking as the way certain applications are publicised. I mean, we are restricted by obviously the legislative requirements as well. Not many of them are involve the newspaper. That tends to be more the committee stuff that requires the newspaper. Most of it's done online, but I appreciate it can be sometimes be quite hard to find on the website. Things like occasional licenses, they're advertised for 7 days, so you have to look during those 7 days, because it's not feasible for us to actually, you know, notify people when these things are up. So whether it's possible in future to have a system whereby it will depend on the computerized system that people sign up for and get notifications when new ones go up, for example. I don't know, I'm not a computer expert, but that's the kind of thing we are kind of looking at to make sure that what we can do, we are, to make sure that it gets out as far as possible. All I would say at the moment is unfortunately, and it's not an ideal system, but it is for people to periodically check the website, because obviously that's where all the adverts go, in the one place. But certainly as part of our online system, that is something that we will be looking at to see if we can improve it anyway. Because obviously it makes our lives easier as well, because people aren't getting in touch with us, ask where things are and things like that. So it helps everybody if it's easier to find.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dunbar.
Thank you, convener. My query is really around the use of the term gender reassignment within the protected characteristics. I understand that might be the term that's used in the legislation.
Yeah.
And therefore is quite out of date, or maybe not a term that would be preferred by the trans community, you know, and the wider community that supports it. And I just wonder if there's any way in which, do we have to use that term, is really my question, rather than using, you know, like a term that might be potentially less offensive?
No, we don't have to use it, but that is what's taken from the legislation. That's where that come from, the report.
We can have a look at that. Sometimes if you change the wording, that can lead to challenge, because we've had a couple of cases where we've not used the exact wording from the legislation, and it's been suggested that means we've applied the wrong test, for example, and things like that. So we might not have to use it, but we'll need to just double check that it's not going to lead us into any problems, but it's something that we can certainly look at.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Dunbar. And I assume that'll be a situation across all of these reports that are coming to other committees as well. So perhaps sharing our concerns might be helpful. Thank you, Councillor Dunbar. Mr. Nazar, these are questions for the board members. Unfortunately, I can't take you in. This is you're here for a particular application. So apologies that I'm not ignoring you, but this is for board members to discuss a report. It's not for external people attending this meeting. So apologies, I can't take you in.
That's okay. Yep, no problem. Sorry, I just had some issue with my camera because they said if you put your camera on, your call will drop out. So I just want to let you know that's why my camera is off.
No, that's fine. Again, it's only the board members that have
Okay.
to have their cameras on, so you're safe enough.
Sure.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, members, we've got the recommendations. They're on page 19 at item 2. There's recommendation 1, 2, 3 and 4, which is to approve the licensing board's new draft quality outcomes 21-25, approve the report on the board's outcomes and mainstreaming equality duties in appendix 1, instruct the clerk to undertake and publish the board's new equality outcomes for 21-25, and 4, note the progress since publication of the board's equality outcome mainstreaming report of 2017. If we could agree those, and notwithstanding agreeing those, we'll obviously look into the other items that were raised today by members. Can we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Right, moving on to the agenda proper. Item 3.1, we have an application for the premises license, the new Albine 11 Albine Place. It's on pages 35 to 60, and we have Mr. Dawson present. Mr. Dawson.
Yes, morning, convener. Morning, all. I represent the company, the applicant company that are applying for a new premises license, and Simon Cruikshank Jr. from that company should be virtually with us as well.
Okay. Okay. Well, if you'd just like to introduce your application, Mr. Dawson, we'll listen with glee.
Thank you, convener. Yes, as I said, it's an application for a new premises license for these premises. Now, your licensing board information sheet's always a very useful document, and it says it all. It runs through everything that needs to be addressed, and I hope that generally all the undertakings that we were required to give the board have been given. It will be, I think, within the board's knowledge, or at least to some of your good selves, that these premises were, of course, licensed since approximately 2006 till 2018. I see Councillor Dunbar nodding there. That's right. I'm biased, but I thought it was a quality, professionally run organisation from the outset, and it was something, Your Honours, that was completely new to the city at that time. It was I'm afraid, in the old days that made the application in 2006 for a provisional grant of a licence under the old legislation. I remember at that lengthy board meeting, I explained to their honours that it would be run as a hybrid, which was all the rage in London and other places around the world, and is still very much in vogue currently. Some people have asked me in the past, what does a hybrid mean? And I understand it's not a particularly self-explanatory term, but what it means is that the premises offer a variety of things, really. You can have your breakfast at the premises. You can then have a coffee and snacks in the morning. You can eat lunch. You can have a bar lunch or a formal lunch. You can eat dinner, and in the evening, especially at weekends, you can enjoy live or recorded music. It's a hybrid. It's different things to different people at different days, and this is what the Albine brought to the city. I remember Tiger had a brief go at it, but that didn't last the sands of time. And the premises, I remember, opened to great excitement, and it had, as some of you will remember, a nightclub downstairs called Apri. It again did a roaring trade when it opened. It had a membership scheme. It was so popular, and the premises continued to trade very successfully under the managership of Finlay Cran and owned by Ivor Finney and his company, and it wasn't due to any financial problems in the running of the Albine that caused it to shut. it was still very popular, and it had been running on the hybrid basis since 2000, and I think it was finalised in about 2007, 2008, up to the time it closed in 2018. And it didn't close, as I said, because it wasn't trading successfully. It was caused, I understand, by the holding company having granted cross guarantees in respect of other premises, and that meant that the lender foreclosed on everything, not only the premises that weren't doing very well, but successful premises like a hotel in Edinburgh and the Alton. And in my opinion, it was a tragedy and a great loss to the city's licensed trade. I've said I thought it was a quality operation in all respects, food, drink and entertainment. And I think, if I remember right, it was the first premises in Aberdeen that had a large outside area. They're now outside area to the front, very, very popular. Finlay Cran tells me that in the summer, on a busy day, it doubled the daytime turnover. Very popular indeed. Now, the applicant company is called Scara Holdings Limited. Now, it has concluded a conditional deal to buy the premises subject to the grant of this license today. It's owned by Simon Cruikshank Jr. and a fellow Aberdonian, Morgan Munter. As you probably know, Your Honours, Simon's family have a lifetime of experience in the licensed trade. He's 33. He has worked in the trade since leaving school, and of course his parents have worked in the trade all their lives as well. They've owned premises across the city. They formerly had the Beeldside Inn, close to my heart, and they also currently run the Ploughman and the Richmond Arms in Petercuta. They know very, very well how to run quality establishments. Now, the application itself is based on the premises licence for the Alpine that was in force, Your Honours, at the time of closure in 2018. I thought that was the simplest way to proceed. The applicants are simply looking to trade on the same conditions as that licence was in operation up to the time of its closure. Unfortunately, the licence was surrendered by the liquidators, so we have to start again from scratch, but I thought it would be best if we simply applied on the basis of what was there at the time. Maybe one change to the application that was agreed with Diane Sandy, LSO, who as usual was very, very helpful. The emphasis of the new operation is it's much more to encourage access to families, children and young persons on certain well-defined terms. And Diane Sandy and my clients, and indeed the police have come into this as well, they agreed an amendment to the wording of the operating plan to achieve a family-friendly atmosphere. And I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I think the police are happy with that as well. And the application was amended by me to take that into account as well. Now, this application has attracted absolutely no objections. Doesn't seem to be any public problems with it. The police have raised one matter, Your Honours, and I need probably to address you on it. As you'll know, the premises are just at the bottom of Albine Place, just about beside the Holborn Junction, but they are slightly outside the area that is designated as city centre. I think it's about 60 yards to the west of the boundary of the city centre. It's very close to Babylon, which I think is just on the limit. So, in the statement of licensing policy, there are different hours for city centre premises and non-city centre premises, and I'm concentrating on the terminal hours. The terminal hours laid out in the statement of premises out with city centre says Sunday to Thursday, midnight, Friday and Saturday, 1 o'clock. Now, these premises have always enjoyed city centre terminal hours since they opened because of the hybrid operation and its proximity within a matter of yards to the city centre area. The competition was just down the road, round in Justice Mill Lane, round in Union Street, and the licensing board have always granted the city centre hours to these premises, which meant there was a terminal hour, if I remember right, Wednesdays and Thursdays to 2 o'clock, Fridays and Saturdays till 3 o'clock. That was always felt that it would provide the Albion with a level playing field that the nightclub industry should have. And I'd ask the board to grant these hours, even though they are a departure from the statement of licensing policy. I would point out that Scotland very fairly have offered no objection to that course of action. On page 2, I think just very briefly, they say, I am aware, however, the premises previously traded with these core hours, and that is the extended hours. And therefore I offer no objection. That's very fair of them, and I'm grateful to them. So there has been a precedent for the whole currency of the last licence that it was granted city centre hours as well. So what will happen if licence is granted today? Well, the applicants will firstly, they'll finalise the purchase of the premises. It's a big step. It's a big deal, especially to them, and I think it shows a modicum of faith in the licensed trade in Aberdeen, and hopefully going forward that will be a shoot for new growth once things reopen. They will take their time, however, to make sure everything is in order before opening. They're not going to hurry this. So the date that they hope to open the premises by is the 1st of July 2021. So they're going to take their time to make sure everything is right. The number of people they'll employ will be approximately 30, part-time and full-time. And they want to get the ground floor operation right, including the outside courtyard area before they look at the downstairs nightclub. So the downstairs nightclub will not be opened initially, but it is important it retains the hours it enjoyed previously. Things changed over the years since these premises opened, and latterly there were people who would come into the Albion after a formal dinner or an event and wanted to listen to some music downstairs. There were private functions booked downstairs. So things have evolved since it was a pure nightclub, and most probably I don't think it will be a pure nightclub again. Times have changed, things have passed. So, but there is still, I'm told, a significant demand for these late night premises, probably for a slightly older age group, not as old as me, but probably more like the convener's age. But certainly there's a demand for more for late night music when you're probably sitting down. Now,
you don't mean I have to sit down because I'm too old to dance?
Convener, I said I was implying you were a lot younger than me, which you are.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. Could I take in Sergeant Flett?
Yes, hello, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Dawson. You've read out my bit of the letter. I don't need to say much. There were 3 matters raised within the police letter, 2 of which have been addressed, leaving just the pointing out the fact that it is out with the board's policy by matter of a small distance, and we offer no objection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Flett. Questions for either Mr. Dawson or Sergeant?
Convener, just to give you a couple more things. I'm sorry to detaining you, but we'll try not to do that much longer. Also, the clients want to carry out some alterations in the next few weeks, and an application to have Simon Cruikshank Jr. appointed as DPM, Designated Premises Manager, will be lodged today or tomorrow to bring matters up to date. Just to finish, very important, welcome return of the Albion to the licensed trade in Aberdeen. Sends out the right message. I've already said there's life after lockdown. Major project for the applicants, but I can assure they're very excited by it. I would submit the application deserves the support of the board in these very uncertain times, and I would commend it, and I would move the grant. And thank you.
Okay, I'll just take some questions. Councillor Cameron first, and then Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, convener. You've made me feel really well this morning, Councillor Dawson, because our ages are not that dissimilar. I was okay before I come on. I'm not so sure now. I'm not quite sure where this question lies. I was a bit concerned that it's going to be outside board's policy if we grant what was there before, on the basis of the fact that the licence had been surrendered. But Mr. Dawson has kind of covered that. So my question is linked to that rather than anything else. And perhaps it's maybe for Mr. Monroe rather than the other two people have spoken already. If we grant this licence, it would be granted out with the board's policy. And therefore the company, am I right in thinking the company would not be entitled to any of the seasonal extensions that would be available?
I'll take it, Mr. Monroe. We already had this conversation, myself and Mr. Monroe, so I do know the answer, but I'll get Mr. Monroe to give it to you.
I'm not sure I know the answer, to be fair, but yeah. No, I think they still would, Councillor, for all it's out with policy in terms of core hours, as long as they're within the 15-hour trading window. That's the cut off for the seasonal variations. It's whether or not they trade for 15 hours or less in terms of the board's policy. It's not the terminal hour as such, it's the total trading hours during the day. So provided they fall within that catchment, then they would still qualify for that.
Okay, so if I could have a supplementary, then I obviously was linking it to the policy as a whole as opposed to that one item. If we grant on the basis of they had it before, it is a new application, and therefore we would be granting something that is outside of policy in relation to city centre. And therefore, are we at risk of squeezing outwards the boundaries of the city centre around the whole of the city centre boundary?
I guess in theory, yes, there is that risk. As you'll know, each application has to be determined on its own merits. So, and a policy is not an absolute no-no. It's obviously the policy. There needs to be reasons for departing from policy. So that's the decision that's before the board. Whether, I guess the points that have been made, the proximity to the city centre area, the fact that it's operated these hours before without any issues. That's the question before the board, whether you feel that those justify a departure from policy in this instance. The fact that this was granted doesn't mean another one that's just as close in another area will automatically get it as well. You'll have that same question to ask if that ever comes forward.
Okay, no, thank you for that. I see there's three other people wanting to get in, so I'll stop there. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Gregg, I had you next.
Thank you, convener. Since we're considering a grant which would be out with policy, I think it's worthwhile asking questions relating to the impact on the area. So it would be useful to know. There's mention of outdoor drinking. Is that at the front of the building or at the rear where there are residential properties? There's also mention of, I think it's page 49, of music exceeding 85 decibels. So could we have a little bit more feedback on those factors?
Mr. Dawson, can you answer that?
Yes, if I can remember just what Councillor Gregg was.
He was asking if the outside drinking area was confined to the front or was it to the rear?
There's only a car park at the back, no outside area. It's just the front courtyard. I'm sure I think it's Councillor Gregg's area, so I'm sure he knows the premise as well. But it's just the front courtyard that leads you up to the front door.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And does the 85 decibels relate to within the building or outside?
Absolutely, only within and downstairs in Apri, not to the upstairs ground floor premises at all.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think we can, sorry, Councillor Gregg, it was just to say, I think Mr Dawson can confirm they accepted the condition for outdoor drinking, which is no amplified music.
Yeah.
No amplified music
Sorry,
outside.
Councillor Gregg, I cut in there.
No, that's fine. Thank you. That's really helpful. I mean, I was bearing in mind the police recommendation of the terminal hour of 22 hours. I mean, it is very welcome to see businesses being rejuvenated, coming back. And there was a bit of a discussion about this application at the Community Council, but obviously there wasn't an objection submitted in the end. So great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gregg. Councillor McClellan, excuse me.
Thank you, convener. Just in terms of what we're considering, you know, by considering a premises slightly outside the city centre, based on it previously being, you know, having that licence, is it perhaps something that we need to consider to perhaps review the boundary of the city centre in that regard? You know, whilst it would be out of policy currently if we granted it, more long term, you know, if it was previously operating in that manner, is it perhaps something we should update the boundary, you know, if we do grant it as well, to consult on that anyway?
Yeah. Mr Munro, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we can bear in mind. There's always going to be a cut-off point somewhere, and there's chances are there's always going to be a premises that's not far from the cut-off point. I suspect the most appropriate time to be doing that is when we look at our policy statement again. But it's certainly something that we can absolutely sort of pencil in terms of when we are looking at our policy again, to look to see if the boundary is still relevant or if it needs to be altered. These things can always be kept under review, and I guess the best way to do it is if we look at it and there has been 5 or 6 exceptions to policy, because we base it, then that would be reasonable evidence that suggests that it is worth looking at changing the boundary. So I'm not sure it's a question for now, but certainly yes, it's worth keeping in mind, and something that we can look at in due course of time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McClellan. Councillor Townsend.
Yeah, thank you, convener. I just wondered if it's not so much that we need to review the boundary, it's we have to just apply the policy in a flexible, well thought out manner, and that the city centre area is defined because of the nature of the area, and 60 metres or so doesn't take it into necessarily a major residential area or wherever. So I think it's the whole nature of how we've set the policy, the reason for the policy, as opposed to just a short distance of change. I think that's how I have it in my mind, that to apply it with a degree of sense and flexibility.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Townsend. Is there any other questions? We have slightly strayed into the debate as well as the questioning. So if there's no other questions, no, I'm not seeing any. Is there anybody who wants to add anything in debate? Just looking, not seeing anything. I think there's been a lot of discussion about this, and I think that Albion used to be known as the 3 Ds amongst a certain generation, and that was drinking, dining and dancing. And it meant they didn't have to get their hair wet when they were outside, because they were more interested in that than having to move on to other premises. And that's not because I was there, Mr Dawson, although I did quite enjoy the food. I mean, what we have is we have an application that is, we've heard, very much on the borderline. Those of you who may recall, we had a similar situation actually at the Sandman, where it was just a footstep outside the boundary. And again, as Councillor Townsend mentioned, we used a flexible approach and being pragmatic. I think we've always got to be careful if it's highly residential and an impact on residents. But I think, you know, the Albion has a track history of being there. You know, I think, as Councillor Gregg mentioned, it's reassuring that the police haven't offered any concerns and are not objecting to the use of those hours. So I would be happy to support.
Sorry, just before we go any further, and they may not want, we should offer both parties a chance to sum up just before we go to the decision. They might not want to, but.
Well, I laughed because Mr Dawson already did his summing up and said I'd move the grant, so that's why I decided not to offer it again. But would you like to say anything, Mr Dawson?
Not really, to be honest. I think you and the councillors have said it all. It's a quality operation. It's never ever had any trouble from the 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock licences, and they were granted throughout the opening the years. And I think it clearly would be an exception, just because of the track history and the type of operation and the quality that those premises afforded the city, and it would make a fairly big difference to their decision making downstairs if they didn't get the extended hours.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. Sorry, Sergeant Flett, I should have just said, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, thank you. All said.
Thank you. As I say, I was moving that we grant the request for a new premises license. I think it's, as I say, it's going to be a welcome addition or return, I suppose you might say, to that area of town. And I think Mr. Dawson said it himself. I think it's a positive vote of confidence in the Aberdeen city centre. So with that, I know it's, as I say, marginally on the borderline in terms of the terminal hour, but I think because of the limited residential adjacent to it, I think that we can comfortably move to approve. So can I just get agreement? Can we all grant? In fact, I'll ask Mr. Munro just to go round so that we've got it verbalised for the record.
Okay, so the motion is to grant the application as applied for, with the various conditions that have already been agreed. Convener?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Dunbar?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor McClellan?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Sella?
Grant.
Thank you. And Councillor Townsend? Thank you. So that's unanimous.
Thanks very much, Mr. Munro. The second item on the agenda at 3.2 is an application for a variation of premises licence at the Aberdeen Alton Hotel South, Suture Head Road, I think it should say. Alton, it's on page 61 to 82. Now, I believe we have Niall Hazard, but we've also got Madeline Westland from the Cove Community Council. Is that correct?
Yes, convener. This is Marlene Westland from Cove Community Council here.
Okay, thank you. And Niall, I see you on my list. There you are in the middle of my page, my screen, should say. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Sorry, I feel sorry, Mr. Munro. I'm not giving you your place to introduce everything. I've been just taking over.
Absolutely fine by me. Fire on.
It's this different setup that we've got. Mr. Hazard, I think obviously there's quite a number of elements to this application. So perhaps if I could ask you to introduce this application in detail for us. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, my pleasure. Good morning again. And just for the record, I'm accompanied on the call virtually by Chris Manship, who's the General Manager of the hotel, and Paula Ross, who's the Group Legal Manager for the Hotel Management Company. Just in case there's any specific questions that perhaps I can't answer, they'll be able to offer information. In terms of the application, what I can say is that the catalyst to the major variation was a significant investment in refurbishment of the premises at the turn of the year. Some £500,000 was invested in upgrading the public areas, the bar, restaurant, etc., the function suites. And as a result of that, we took a more forensic look at the licence and identified some other sort of shortcomings in the licence that were due to be or should have been updated. I'll just run through them and explain the thinking behind them. So in terms of the application as it currently stands, I think this is important for colleagues from the Community Council. The application originally came forward seeking some flexibility of the terminal hour throughout the week. We've moved away from that. We're simply seeking to amend the terminal hour to 1 AM Friday and Saturday, so it falls in line with your Honours policy. So weeknights there's going to be no change, and that's just taken on board the nature of the business and also some of the concerns. It was only for flexibility, and the hotel didn't wish to unduly worry the residents, etc., nearby. The next thing that they sought to introduce was an off-sales facility. This is very infrequent use as anticipated. The hotel management company do have experience to run a number of hotels across Scotland. They did see a slight increase in customer demand for picnic campers, that type of thing, a little bottle of fizz if they're going out for tours and excursions. And that's really the nature of it. There's also the opportunity with the function suite, etc., to showcase some craft spirits, beers, etc., especially locally produced. And often it can be a bit of a challenge if there isn't a facility to retail those to members of the public that come to those product launches, demonstrations. And again, this is just harking back to experience of other venues. So it's very much, I think, an ancillary and infrequent service, but one that will be useful to have if we're opening the licence up to deal with the refurbishment. We saw it in a similar vein to tidy the licence up when it comes to seasonal variations, again, just for flexibility, should there be events that would necessitate the use of a general extension granted by the board in terms of policy. And then when we looked at the activities, it struck me as curious that films and televised sport, etc., weren't permitted out with core hours, and that's simply because all of the letting bedrooms are within the licence footprint, and of course they all have access to televisions, etc. So just from a point of making sure that it's absolutely capturing all of the activities, then that's why we did that. With regards to the main thrust of the application, there's the application to include the external area. We have accepted the 3 conditions, so that hopefully gives comfort to, again, colleagues from the Community Council. That external area is restricted to a maximum terminal hour of 10 p.m. and that's every night of the week, so there's no late night activities out there. It's just off the dining area. It seemed to be potentially on a good day an extension of that dining area, and will be used in a very, I think, sensitive manner, not least given that, you know, our nearest noise sensitive premises is our own residence, so there'll be no activities as such out there. It's just an eating and drinking area. Beyond that, there was a slight tidy up in relation to the terms of children's access, and I had useful discussions with Ms. Sanday, the LSO. It could have been read very arbitrarily that, for example, children could only access the bar and dining area when consuming a meal. So that means if you're resident in the hotel, mum and dad want to go in for a coffee, but there's no food being consumed, it could be read that it was unduly restrictive. So obviously good due diligence from the management team here. It's not a case where they're looking to throw the bar open for parents to come in drinking with kids, but it's just to make sure that, you know, there's a flexibility that any hotel would expect, I think, in the current times, where you wouldn't turn around to someone just because they had a child and say, well, the only way you can sit in here is if you order a full sit-down meal. So the times, etc., don't change. It's just really a tidy up. In summary, I would say it's a very good application. The scale of the investment, some £500,000, I think is to be welcome, not least in the current climate. The only slight downside is, of course, no one's really got to see the improvements yet because, you know, other than open for key workers, there have been no guests able to actually come and view the very nicely set out spectacular bar, etc. But we hope that's a matter that's going to change from the 26th of this month and onwards. So I think it's a welcome addition. I hope that with the tweaks, particularly around the terminal hour, bringing it in line with policy and the acceptance of the conditions, there aren't really any outstanding concerns. And I'm grateful to Sergeant Flett, who had a good conversation with in the run-up to the application for withdrawing the police representation on the basis that we modified the hours as well. So on that basis, happy to answer any questions, but it's a good application and my motion would be to grant. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Hazard. Mrs. Westland, would you like to say anything about your letter that you've sent in?
Yes, Convener, thank you very much for inviting me to do that. The letter, I think the main concerns that we have raised, I think have been answered by the applicant, and I think it's encouraging that there's been clarification, you know, that there's an amendment to the terminal hour to 1 AM on Friday and Saturday only. I think that's what I picked up from what you're saying just now. I think the other main concern that we were thinking that we were concerned about was the noise outdoors, and I think the clarification around what the term film meant, I think, is helpful as well, because I think, you know, there were visions, I think, in some members of the community that there would be, you know, outdoor noise quite a lot, you know, and it could be every day if it wasn't kind of I suppose, addressed through the board. So I appreciate the opportunity to raise those concerns. So if I could maybe just ask for clarification, just a wee bit again about the term film. I think the applicant has said that it's for indoors only. Is that correct? Or will there be outdoor film showing? And what does the term film mean? I know he mentioned, you know, people streaming things from their bedrooms and things like that, or indeed indoors. So maybe just a little bit more clarification on that would be helpful so that I can feed it back.
Okay, certainly. Mr. Hazard, would you like to?
Yes, delighted to, convener. So in terms of the use of the external area, there's no proposal or suggestion it would be used for screening films. That I think sometimes the unfortunate thing is that the synopsis and the site notice, all of the activities and changes can perhaps run one into another just because of lack of space, etc. So from that point of view, that they are completely separate. The premises has also had the always had the permission to permit the showing of films subject to the other regulatory requirements. So, for example, they can't show commercial films without a cinemas license. They don't have one. There's no intention of getting one. There is an exception where they could show films up to 6 times a year. They don't do that without a cinemas license, and there's no intention to do that. Really, the issue here was it said that films were permitted within licensed hours only. And now it's a bit of a pedant in me, but when we were opening up the license, it occurred to me that basically the hotel operates 24/7. If someone's staying in the residential bedrooms and they want to put on a children's movie first thing in the morning because their kids are up at 7, then that is technically showing films in the licensed area. It's out with the core licensed hours, and thus it's a technical, albeit very pedantic, breach of the license. So it's not something, these cards on the table perhaps shouldn't say this, something that necessarily I would have charged forth into had it not been for the fact we were opening the license up for this variation. But when we were doing that, it just seemed to make sense to basically rectify what was a small anomaly. So I hope that's the comfort that's required. The outdoor area will, as I've described it, be an extension to the dining space and used for the types of dining and functions, etc., that they have at the hotel. Nothing more, nothing less.
Does that answer your questions, Mrs. Westland?
Yes, it does, but maybe just further point of clarification that film does mean film. It's not, you know, I think we had visions that it could be televised outdoor sporting events, you know, well, sorry, you know, televised sporting events that would be streamed outside. I think that was one of the concerns, that could happen quite a lot, given the fact that, you know, sport is so popular.
Mr. Hazard, I don't believe that's what you've applied for, but do you want to just give confirmation?
No, I can confirm there's no proposal for any outdoor streaming of sport or anything like that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to finish off saying very supportive, you know, of the hotel. We benefit very much from having the hotel in our community. So I'm very pleased that we've managed to sort of I'll be able to feed back that the concerns that have been raised in the community have been dealt with appropriately, and hopefully to the benefit of the hotel and the community as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time to communicate with us. Oh, I think we've got a bit of feedback. Can I maybe ask Madeline, could you put your mic off now? I think I'm just getting feedback from yourself. You can give me just 2 seconds.
I did have it off.
Okay. If you could just give me 2 seconds, folks, I'm just going to shut the curtain because otherwise I'm disappearing into a glow from the sun. 2 moments. You perhaps didn't want to see me any clearer, but I couldn't see my screen any longer, so I needed to shut it down. Members, has anybody got any questions for Mr. Hazard or Mrs. Westland? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, no questions. Anybody want to enter any debate on this? No. Okay, Mr. Hazard, is there anything further you want to add?
No, just a thanks to colleagues from the Community Council, and indeed there was a ringing endorsement at the end about the asset the hotel is to the community, and that would be very welcome to hear from Chris and Paula's point of view, so thanks for that. That was very gracious.
Okay, thank you. Members, we have before us a variation. It's all within policy. Are we happy to grant? Again, Mr. Monroe, if you could just do a roll call.
Yeah, no problem. So again, the motion is to grant the variation as applied for, with the additional conditions that have already been agreed. Convener?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Dunbar?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor McClellan?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Saylor?
Grant.
Thank you. And Councillor Townsend?
Grant.
Thank you. So that again, that's unanimous. The variation has been granted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Munro. Okay, moving on to item 3.3, which is an application for a variation of premises licence at Cafe Harmony, 21 Bonaccord Terrace, Aberdeen. I believe we have Mr. Nasser with us.
That's right. Yes, I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm still not able to put my camera on. I don't know what's the issue.
That's okay. Would you like to speak to your? There's been no representations, but would you like to say anything?
I would like, yes, to add some comments, just to support my application. Basically, these premises has been granted a license on 2006, 53 people, and recently we had just changed layout, and we fit some fixture, and we had communication with Mr. Kidd. He was concerning some distance issue, and we took the recommendation, and we reduced the capacity from 53 to 47, I believe. If I'm wrong, please correct me. And due to the current situation, the COVID situation, we introduced basically the off license. We applied for the occasional license, a few times, and has been granted. To support our customer, we basically providing the restaurant quality food, and of course, they always wanted the, alcohol beside the food, and we are finding out there are more people that are asking to deliver alcohol when delivering food. So we come to the decision to apply for the off license, and yeah, I think that was the area I was trying to make comment to give you a better idea.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nasser. The description of the variation is on page 83, members. Has anybody got any questions for Mr. Nasser? Let's see. Mr. Munro, do you just want to read out the description, just so, again, we've got it for the recording? Is Mr.
Yep, sorry, yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, technical issues, just the usual. Yep. Yeah, so the variation is obviously to the addition of off sales, and that's Monday to Saturday from 1100 to 2200, and on Sunday from 1200 to 2200. So that obviously reflects the opening hours of the premises, to include alcohol delivery with takeaway food, to allow access for children and young persons for the collection of takeaway food orders, and obviously a change of the layout plan as the applicant has indicated. The CCTV and delivery driver conditions have been accepted by the applicant as well.
Super, thanks, Mr. Munro. Councillor Cameron.
My apologies, I lost my screen for a moment there. It's really a question of clarification in relation to the delivery driver requirement. In the past, we've had a number of applications in the last few years about delivery using people like Just Eat and Deliveroo, as opposed to the company doing their own thing, as it were. And during the last 12 months, the volume of Deliveroo deliveries, if you like, I'll try not to slip up in this, would appear to have increased markedly. And the company has not exactly benefited from the best publicity recently in the way they are dealing with their staff. And I suppose my question is, if it does mean delivery driver and the owner is intending to control this completely, I don't actually have a question, but if he's intending subcontracting this and somehow, I would like to have confidence that all these requirements are going to be in place.
Of course, yes. Basically, to be honest, in terms of providing alcohol to the customers from delivery or Just Eat, for us was a little bit hard decision as well, because they are charging almost 30% of the customer's payment, and the value of the alcohol is quite high. So they are making a profit on that. So we introduced our own website to provide alcohol to our own customer, which we have better relationship through our social media and our own customers' details. As I'm speaking just now, to be honest, we are maybe 2% of our orders comes from Just Eat or Deliveroo, including the alcohol. Deliveroo and Just Eat customer usually, they do not want spend higher amount than maybe £40. So basically, the average spend is between £30 to £40. Anything comes over £40 comes in from our website, and maybe 98% of sale of alcohol comes from our own website. I agree, with your comment, but I'm happy to take any advice or consideration you may require.
That's okay. I'm not sure if you've got an answer there. I think
I think I did get an answer, because obviously the applicant has given this a lot of thought, and I'm comforted by that. So yes, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
If I can maybe add to it a little bit, sorry, Councillor, that was the reason for the condition, because albeit the delivery's been carried out by a third party, it's still under the auspices of the premises license. So it's incumbent on the license holder to ensure that anybody who's delivering alcohol on his behalf is doing so in a manner that he's comfortable with. So that was the reason for the condition in the first place. It's the responsibility of the license holder to make sure that anybody who's delivering alcohol on their behalf, they are comfortable that all the necessary checks, etc., are taking place.
No, I'm happy. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nazar. Councillor Gregg.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Convener. There's no police feedback, and I wondered if there was a reason for that. I don't seem to have it in my pack.
Sergeant Flett, I don't see anything, so I assume no comment means no comment.
There was a representation submitted by the police in respect of the delivery condition, which I understand has been accepted by the applicant. Therefore, it won't appear in your pack.
Okay, so it's a positive reason. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Craig. Any other questions? No. Okay, members, I'll move the grant to the variation. Can we go again to the roll call, Mr. Munro?
Yeah, no problem. So again, the motion is to grant the variation as applied for, with obviously the additional conditions as agreed. Convener?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Dunbar?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor McClellan?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Sella?
Grant.
Thank you. And Councillor Townsend?
Grant.
Thank you. So again, the variation has been granted unanimously.
Okay,
thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Nasser, for attending.
Thank you. No problem at all. Thank you very much. Am I okay to leave now?
You can go now, yes.
That's fine. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Thanks.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks.
Moving on to item 3.4, which is an application for a variation of premises license to Cheers Bar 2 to 8 Exchange Street. And I'm going to hand over to Mr. Munro to explain the variation.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, there's nobody attending for this one. It looks a lot more complicated than it is. This premises had an upstairs and downstairs which had separate licenses. They are combining those into one license, which is why it looks like a lot's happening. But the operation isn't actually changing. They're just amalgamating the two licenses into one, which explains the various changes, because they're adding the stuff from one license into the other. There have been no representations. Again, the usual conditions regarding delivery driver and things like that have all been agreed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Munro. Any questions, members? No? Okay, again, I'll move to grant the variation. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gregg.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't get there on time. Sorry for that.
That's all right, don't worry.
Just for clarification, what is adult entertainment, which is mentioned in the report?
One of the licenses already has it. It just allows them, and my understanding is they don't do adult entertainment on a regular basis. It's allow them to have, so it would let them have like an adult comedian or an adult show or something like that. I think the upstairs was almost like a nightclub type scenario, so it would allow them to have on occasion, as I said, something that would come under the auspices of adult entertainment. As I said, it's something that's already in one of the licenses. They're just adding it, as I said, when they're combining the two.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay, any other questions? Yep. Okay, again, I'll move to grant the variation. Mr. Munro, can you do the necessary, please?
Yeah, no problem. So, yeah, as I said, the motion is to grant the variation as applied for, with, again, the additional conditions as agreed. Convener?
Grant.
Excuse me, thank you. Councillor Cameron?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Dunbar?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor McClellan?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Seller?
Grant.
Thank you. And Councillor Townsend?
Grant.
Thank you. So again, the variation is granted unanimously.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Munro. Moving on to agenda, excuse me, item 3.5, which is a variation for the premises licence of Cooper's Bar. Now, this is probably the simplest one we've got today. I can even probably read out the description, but you know what, Mr. Munro, I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah, fairly straightforward. It's simply the addition of bar meals to the operating plan of the premises, and astonishingly, there have been no representations or objections to this one.
So, any questions? And please don't ask what's on the menu. Okay, again, I'll move to grant the variation. Mr. Munro.
Yeah, no problem. So, yeah, obviously the motion is just to grant the variation as applied for. Convener?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron? Nope.
Is that coming off?
Just nod if you want.
Yes.
Councillor Dunbar?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor McClellan?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Seller?
Grant.
Thank you. And Councillor Townsend? Oh, have we lost Councillor Townsend?
Sorry, Grant.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, again, that one's granted unanimously.
Excuse me. Right, moving on to item 3.6, which is an application for a variation of premises licence at the Dutch Mill Hotel, 7 Screens Road. It's on pages 139 to 158. And I believe we've got Jackie Furrow from Brody's for this application.
Yep, morning.
Morning. I'll just hand over to yourself, Mrs. Brody's. Mrs. Brody, sorry. Mrs. Burrow.
Thank you, Convener, Your Honours. Mr. Gordon Nicol, who's the owner and the designated premises manager of the hotels, on the call this morning as well. This application is looking to include 2 external seating areas, which are usually used for parking at the hotel, at the front and rear of the premises. These 2 areas were used successfully last year during the summer by way of occasional licences. We're looking to include them permanently into the footprint of the licence. The 2 new areas, the occupancy capacity of the premises will increase from 301 at the moment to 551. This includes 135 people in the front area and 115 people at the rear. An amended layout plan has been submitted showing the external areas. There's also going to be a temporary dispense bar which will be in place when these areas have been used, but it will be removed when the areas are not in use, probably during the winter months. We're also amending the description of the premises to remove reference to car parking. The variation seeks to amend on sales and off sales hours, opening times on Sundays from 12 to 10, just to keep everything in line with the rest of the week. And the final part of the variation updates Mr. Nicholl's details as the premises manager with his renewed personal licence. Mr. Nicholl has agreed to the conditions set out by Licensing Standards and Police Scotland with regard to the outside areas, and no other objections have been raised. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Okay. Councillor Cameron, you were quick there.
Yeah, I wasn't doing too well with my pad, so I've put a mouse on it, so it's working well. Yeah, it was really a clarification in relation to removing any reference to car parking. Would this be something that had to be approved by planning?
I'll bring in Mr. Munro. Again, as planning convener, could probably answer it, but I'll get Mr. Munro to come in.
To be fair, you'll probably know more than me, to be honest. My understanding is yes, it may do. Obviously, that's something that the planning department would need to. Planning is not a consultee for ourselves because they've got their own legislation, etc. So it's something that the applicant will probably need to look at with the planning department.
Oh, thank you for that. That was really the reason I was raising it. Not that I didn't think they should remove the reference, but just what the implications of that might have been, not necessarily for the licence, but for the business. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, convener. The condition that we're looking at imposing is a 22-hour terminal hour and no external music or entertainment. Just for information, hitherto, has there been no outdoor music and no outdoor entertainment in that space so far?
No, as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been, because I think that condition was part of the occasional licence conditions when they were enforced, but maybe Mr. Nicholl can confirm that. I think I'm right in saying that, Gordon, am I?
Yeah, there's no music outside, never has been.
Okay. That's fine, thank you. It was just to confirm that it's just a continuation of the way that that the space has been organised so far. Thank you for that.
Yeah, the spaces are going to be run exactly as they were last summer, right, when the occasional licences were in force.
Thank you.
Can any other questions before I come in? Can I just check out front? I believe you did have a television screen, didn't you?
Yes.
And you're continuing with a television screen?
Yeah, but there's no volume.
Okay.
Allowed up till now anyway.
Okay, that's fine. And it's just no amplified music. I think I read somewhere about that there is some background music when the cleaners are in and things like that. So that's it.
Inside, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any other hands. Okay. Mrs. Merrill, is there anything you want to add before?
No, not really. No, as I say, the outdoor spaces were used successfully last summer by way of occasionals. Nothing's changing in the way the operation's going to be run, apart from the inclusion of a temporary dispense bar, which obviously is going to speed things up for staff, means that they're not having to come in and out to get drinks and things. So yeah, that was it basically.
Okay, that's super. Thanks very much. So with that, members, I'll move the variation of the premises licence for the Dutch Mill. Mr. Munro, can we go to the vote, please?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. So yes, so again, the motion is to grant the variation as applied for with the agreed conditions again. Convener?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Dunbar?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor McClellan?
Grant.
Thank you. So again, that variation is granted unanimously.
Thank you, Cyril and Mr. Nicol for attending. Thank you.
Thanks.
Moving on to the final variation, which it says application for variation, but we all know it's variation at 3.7 for the premises at Suture Golf. Peter Suture Golf Club, Old Town, Burnside Road, Peter Suture. It's on pages 159 to 174. And we have Mr. Brian McMahon, I believe, with us.
Yes, thank you, Your Honour.
Thank you. Welcome. Would you like just to say a bit about your application?
Yes, good morning, Convener, Your Honours. Brian McMahon representing Peter Suture Golf Club. I've got Bob Skeen on the telephone beside me if needed. He's the House Convener. If there's any difficult questions, I'm sure he'll answer them for me. Major ovation before Your Honours is for the external area at the club.
Convener.
Sorry.
Sorry. Can I interrupt just very briefly?
Yes.
Mr. McMahon's mentioned Bob Skeen. I didn't know he was going to be in this call. Bob Skeen is a close personal friend of mine, so I should probably leave. If that's okay. I'd rather, if Bob is potentially going to be there, I think I need to leave, Convener.
That's no problem.
So
we'll call you back in.
Call me back then. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. McMahon, carry on.
No, that's okay. He's only there for difficult questions, so unless he was going to have to ask a difficult question, I'm sure he could have stayed. The approximate dimensions of the external area are 10 by 10. The golf club's happy to adopt the licence board's external conditions as requested by the police and the LSO, and subject to questions, I would commend the application to you.
Okay, that was nice and straightforward. Any questions? No. Okay, no questions. Well, I'll be moving to grant the variation. Mr. Monroe.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. So again, the motion is to grant the variation with the additional conditions as agreed. Convener?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron's Way. Councillor Dunbar?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor McClellan?
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Seller?
Grant.
Thank you. And Councillor Townsend?
Grant.
Thank you. So again, that has been granted unanimously.
Thanks very much for coming, Brian and Bob. We'll take Councillor Cameron back in.
Obliged, Your Honour. Could I have one request, Your Honour? I actually, we had a very sort of hand-knitted drawing that went in. We have a better drawing from the architect. With Your Honour's permission, I'll lodge that tomorrow with Benedict at the licensing office.
That'll be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thanks then. Thank you. Can we get Mr. Councillor Cameron back in?
I'll try and do that just now.
I would do, but I'm not that technical.
Well, I'm offering no promises. I think I've invited him. Have I?
Perhaps Councillor McClellan or Townsend.
Yeah, maybe if somebody just gets touch and ask them to rejoin here.
Councillor Dunbar, are you for?
I was just going to ask if we could maybe take this opportunity for a couple of minutes. So
oh, here we go.
Yeah. We can take 5 minutes and we'll come back in. Okay. That'll give you a comfort break, so we'll come back in at 11:50.
And we're getting into the a confidential part of the agenda now as well. So what I would maybe ask is everybody to leave and rejoin the lobby that aren't the board members, so that we can invite you in when it's your item. And Benedict, if you can stop the recording now as well, because we'll be getting into the confidential part.
I think it'd be okay if I stay on, Sandy, because I'm dealing with the next.
You're the next one, yeah, so that's fine, yeah.
Okay.